Mr. Bancel, Moderna recently paid NIH $400 million. Do you believe it creates a conflict of interest for the government employees who are making money now off of the vaccine to also be dictating the policy about how many times we have to take the vaccine?
Good morning, Senator. Indeed, we recently made, before Christmas last year, a $400 million payment to the NIH for an old patent that they had developed, not related to COVID, but useful in the development of a COVID vaccine to pay them for their work. It's for the U.S. government to assess how that money should be used.
Do you think it creates a conflict of interest for the same people deciding the policy of how often we have to take the vaccine to also be making money the more times we take the vaccine? Yes or no?
This is for the government to decide, Senator.
You have no opinion on whether or not it creates a conflict of interest. Is there a higher interest or a higher incidence of myocarditis among adolescent males 16 to 24 after taking your vaccine?
So thank you for the question, Senator. First, let me say we care deeply about safety, and we're working closely with the CDC and the FDA to
Pretty much a yes or no. Is there a higher incidence of myocarditis among boys 16 to 24 after they take your vaccine?
The data I've seen from the CDC actually shown that there's less myocarditis for people who get the vaccine versus who get COVID infection.
You're saying that for ages 16 to 24 among males who take the COVID vaccine, their risk of myocarditis is less than people who get the disease.
That is my understanding, Senator.
That is not true, and I'd like to enter into the record 6 peer-reviewed papers from the Journal of Vaccine, the Annals of Medicine, that say the complete opposite of what you say. I also spoke with your president just last week, and he readily acknowledged in private that, yes, there is an increased risk of myocarditis. The fact that you can't say it in public is quite disturbing. Do you think it's scientifically sound to mandate 3 vaccines for adolescent boys?
This is for the public health leaders to decide, Senator.
You've been advocating for it, you've been interviewed, and you've been advocating for boosters. Do you know when the myocarditis is most common among these adolescent boys? After the second dose. When I spoke with your president, he readily acknowledged in private, yeah, that maybe there ought to be a discussion whether we ought to have 1 vaccine versus 2 versus 3. If 90% of the myocarditis comes after the second dose, why don't we have a rational discussion about 1? Marty McCary, a physician from Johns Hopkins, has said exactly the same thing. It's been discussed, and yet we have this ridiculous notion from the CDC. So the CDC says, and I'll ask you this question. Let's start it as a question. Your 16-year-old's had COVID. Your 16-year-old gets better and now has recovered from COVID. You vaccinate them and they get myocarditis. Are you going to give them 2 more vaccines? Your child, give them 2 more vaccines?
I'm not a clinician. I will have to discuss.
You have children.
I do.
Have you vaccinated your children?
I have.
How many times?
3 or 4 times.
3 or 4 times.
So
the CDC recommends this, and you're obviously someone who's self-interested in the outcome here, but the CDC says that if your 15, 16-year-old gets COVID, recovers, takes a vaccine and gets myocarditis, is hospitalized with elevated heart enzymes, and is very sick, the CDC says as soon as he gets better, vaccinate him again. You know how many American parents think that that's a rational, reasonable thing to do? Do you know how many countries don't do this for children? Sweden doesn't offer the vaccine for kids under 12 unless they're at risk for severe disease. And I agree with that. I'm not saying never on any of this. I think it's a very reasonable position to say kids at risk or have some diseases that there may be a reason for vaccinating some children. Finland doesn't recommend it for under 12 months. Norway also. England as well. France, Poland, Germany, Switzerland, and all vaccinate 12 and up. So we got half the world who have looked at these studies. There's a study in Israel of thousands of patients, and yet you sit here and act as if you've never heard of myocarditis and you don't think it's an increased risk for young adolescent males when all of the studies who isolate out people by age have found that, yes, there's an increased risk after taking your vaccine. Pfizer too, but worse with Moderna.
There's an increased risk, Senator. I was comparing it to somebody who gets COVID.
Well, that's also not true either, but there's an increased risk of getting it. But even when they compare it to the disease, there are many papers out there that do show that there's more of a risk of myocarditis after vaccination. So you have to weigh the risk and balances. And you are right, you're going to make less money because you're going to try, and they're already trying, the CDC's got it on their schedule, they're going to try to force all the kids in America to do this through school. But guess what? Parents aren't going to do it. They've seen that COVID is not deadly in children, and you're right, it's become less deadly over time. Your market's going down, so you aren't going to make as much money. I'm all for you making money in an honest way, but I don't like the idea that the people making the decisions in government are also receiving money and are now conflicted in their interest.
Thank you, Senator Paul.
How is it that Dr. Fauci is still with the NIH? The man's a publicity hound. The man is only interested in money.
Money?
I understand that Anthony Fauci developed COVID-19 in 2014. Please have Dr. Fauci explain this to Americans, why he sold it to the Chinese to use against us.
So
I think he's a little psycho, don't you?
psycho.
Did this on purpose. 5-1 now, so you guys can play your game and stop doing this big pandemic.
We the people are going to find him. We're going to rip his little hat off and down his neck. Thanks.
Please, thank you. Have
So-
a good day.
It is interesting, troublesome, and sad, the extraordinary degree of divisiveness that we have in society. Somebody who can look
I don't think we're divided. I'm not sure we're divided. By the way, so it is the 22nd, 22 March, year of our Lord 2023. It is Wednesday, and I wanted to mix it up. You know, I was going to come back and start with all the stuff in New York. The New York Post is breaking stories about the grand jury in disarray. But as I've said, we can't take time away from the important stories about signal and what is really going on in the world and what most impacts your life and the life of the nation to play these games with the administration. We are going to get into this later and do it, but so we'll get you up to speed on everything. Naomi, first I have a question. Yale, you just heard Rand Paul. You know, the only thing I think I'd rather see than Dr. Rand Paul going with these executives or Fauci these guys is to see Natalie Winters and Naomi Wolf, if they were up there as the Grand Inquisitors asking your questions. The people, young men at Yale, are young men at Yale still mandated? You heard that exchange right there. Are they still mandated to take this vaccine? I'm not saying you can take a religious exemption, but is there overall a mandate from the hallowed halls of Yale to force vaccinations on these kids?
So the audio's a little difficult for me, letting your producers know, but I think I heard you ask if young men at Yale are still being mandated to take these vaccines. And the answer, as of my last information about this, the start of spring semester, was yes. They can only get out of it if they get a religious exemption. And religious exemptions had been, until the focus that we all put on Yale just around Christmas and after, virtually impossible to get. So to my knowledge, President Salave has not rescinded the mandate. It's not just young men, it's young women being forced to take the bivalent vaccine. And may I just say, just to go back to campus, just to not lose the $30,000 their parents paid for the previous semester. Stéphane Bancel was flat out lying, and I'm glad that Senator Paul told him and told America that he was lying about myocarditis in young girls.
Hang on. Whoa. Hang on 1 second. We're going to get this. Tell the audience who that guy is. We had a Chiron, but I want you to set it up. Tell it who it is. This is an incredibly important Senate hearing. Who was that individual we were seeing? And then you can walk through. Obviously, Rand Paul's like you. He's got all the details. He's got all the. When he asks a question, he already knows what the correct answer should be. Who is that individual? Why is he important? And why is he sitting there in front of a Senate inquiry on the vaccine this late in the game, ma'am?
This late in the day, exactly. Well, that, ladies and gentlemen, is Stéphane Bancel, who is the CEO, to my knowledge, of Moderna. And Moderna is a company that had not had a single success until they whacked together this mRNA injection, which basically uses the same technology of the Pfizer injection that we've been exposing with your help. And so he's answering questions about the weaponization, basically, of this injection, the economics of it, and why he's been advocating for it to be mandated and boosted into people who are at statistically insignificant risk for serious outcomes from COVID, but who have statistically horrific outcomes after having been injected with this murderous injection. And what I was just going to hold up in this amazing reference is that our Dr. Chris Flowers in March of 2022 published a report showing that Pfizer, and again, Moderna uses the same technology, knew as of June of 2021, so like 2 years ago, that the injections had damaged the hearts of 35 minors. So, and it was only 4 months later that there was a press release released by our government. So basically, Rand Paul is asking, I think he could ask it even more aggressively, it's not just that 6 peer-reviewed studies show that there's elevated risk of myocarditis, which is very serious heart damage in otherwise perfectly healthy young men. But in fact, there have been studies showing that for over 2 years, in a timeline prior to our government, Stéphane Bancel, Moderna's CEO, the CDC, the White House, all saying inject the children, inject the young adults, inject the college students, mandate the college students. They knew that college students were at vanishingly non-existent risk of serious outcomes from COVID and severe outcomes, including heart transplants and heart damage and early death from this injection. And by the way, now we know the mechanism. The heart is damaged from everything from spike proteins to the tendency of the lipid nanoparticles to aggregate in the bloodstream. So we know that you're taking the hearts of perfectly healthy young men and young women and creating an environment in their bodies that damages their cardiac health. And again,
hang on. I want to make sure the audience that I understand it, so hopefully the audience can understand it also. Although the audience is oftentimes far ahead of where I am on these topics. And I want to make sure I just understand this. You have done with the War Room Posse volunteers and the lawyers and Amy Kelly's coordination, your coordination, you guys have gone through a vast store of information that's the company's internal, basically, documents, correct? Essentially, and what they knew about research and things were going on, correct? Roughly,
yes,
what that huge
correct.
book is reports.
Yes.
What
that is
Rand
correct.
Paul is talking about, what Rand Paul is talking about, in addition to that, there's 6 independent peer reviews that looked at other data sets, either did their own, not experimentation, but looked at other data sets and came to the same conclusion as the reports that you're pulling together from inside Pfizer's own studies. Am I correct in this?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. But at least 6. I mean, that's de minimis. I mean, there was recently a study in Thailand of hundreds of Thai youths that showed a third of them, I believe, had markers for elevated problems with their hearts, post mRNA injection. I mean, there's no question by now. And again, like the FDA issued a press release in August of 2021 warning parents after 4 months of propaganda telling parents to inject their kids, acknowledging that there was cardiac damage, myocarditis and pericarditis, elevated risk. So this is well established. It's been acknowledged by our own criminals, right? Our own criminal syndicate had to, issue a press release saying, well, in fact, it raises the risk of your child, your adolescent, your young adult getting heart damage. So the fact that Stéphane Bancel thought it was okay to just flat out lie, I mean, he's in such a bubble of lies. He had no shame in thinking he could, pull a fast one past the American people and their representatives. When
but it's easy to pull it by Steve Bannon in many of the war room posse, although look at this other jaundiced eyes, because we don't know. We're just civilians that have other things to do in our lives. We listen to these experts. Here's what I really don't get. And I don't mean to pick on Yale because you were at Yale and led this protest to try to get it. But Yale, correct me if I'm wrong, right? It has one of the most revered schools of public health, not just in the country, in the world. Top 2 or 3 most revered schools of public health. So it's not. And that's not staffed by the Warren Posse or Steve Bannon. That's topped by the most brilliant people in public health. How could they see the press release? How could they know, because you've been promulgating this stuff all the time, how could they see the 6 or more peer-reviewed journals? And how can they still mandate, unless a parent has a kid all of a sudden have a religious conversion, right, or do something else that's not quite by the rules, but they got to do it because they got to do it? How can Yale, that has the Yale School of Public Health as one of its colleges or schools, mandate this in January, February, March of 2023? The problem we have here is not just this vaccine and not just this Moderna and not just this. This is to the heart of what the problem here in this country, in that the institutions somehow are not providing the same functions that they've done from the beginning when they were founded back in the 18th, 19th, and earliest 20th century by generations that came before us that understood what it meant, right, to have these institutions that would be foundational elements of the greatest republic in mankind's history. This is the beating heart of it. So not to make another analogy, but how can that happen? That's why I don't, we've had these great doctors on from Yale that have, Harvey Risch and these are said, I don't know what's going on with colleagues, but this is so in your face. How can they not see the 6 studies? How can they not see what you're putting out? How can they not see the press release? How can they not know about the Thai study? And how can they sit there like authoritarians say, no, if you want to return to this thing that you've worked your ass off since you were 3 years old to get to, you must get vaccinated and boosters, ma'am.
Okay, so the thing you said about our institutions not performing the same functions that they did a generation ago is 100% correct, and Yale is a perfect example. I mean, I was absolutely mystified when I went there that they were mandating this injection that had been perfected on 8 mice on perfectly healthy young adults. And then I looked into the money flow, and Yale at this point gets more from HHS than it gets from tuition. It gets $600 million from HHS in the last calendar year, and it got only $450 million from tuition. So it's literally, it doesn't care. It doesn't have to care about the students the way it has to care about doing the bidding of the permanent deep state healthcare establishment, essentially. In addition, Pfizer set up a facility at Yale for $34 million that had some beds in it. So they're funding Yale. And President Salovey, after all of this national scrutiny of how they're mandating the kids, trafficking the kids' bodies, according to Connecticut law about human trafficking, he basically issued a letter to the community and to the world saying, in 2023, Yale's going to be focused on vaccines. So basically, and there's one more piece of evidence that's so important. I think Dr. Malone surfaced this, but it's a document showing, and I believe that it's been independently verified, that there is an organization fostered by the World Economic Forum, of course, of presidents of major universities. On that list are Yale University, Princeton University, also Oxford University, which originated the AstraZeneca vaccine and took hundreds of millions from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and Cambridge University. And many Chinese universities. So these are like the flower of Western civilization has been bought out by the same evildoers who have this tiny, tight circle of money flow that I described the last time I spoke with you. And let us also note that the $400 million in royalties going to NHS from Moderna, right? It's a circle, right? Like Moderna gets the check from the government gives a cut back to NHS in royalties. Well, I'm very surprised that Senator Paul didn't subpoena or demand to see what those royalties are, because I told all of you, I told America on Tucker Carlson in 2021 that Dr. Fauci does not work for us. And I've said here, and I've said on Tucker Carlson's program everywhere I could, that we need to look at his royalties, because RFK Jr. points out that Dr. Fauci has 8 patents. So if you only get a royalty if someone uses the thing, right? Moderna can't just give NIH a check for $400 million for royalties unless there are billions of units, right, of the thing that of which the royalties add up to $400 million, right? A royalty is just a percentage of a sale or of a unit. So you can't just write a blank check and say it's royalties, or that's an even more giant criminal act or act of fraud. So what we've got to know is Dr. Fauci getting royalties? We know he is. We know you can get up to $150,000 a year if you're an NIH employee with a patent. And we know that he's got 8 patents in HIV injections. We know his wife sits on the ethics committee for the NIH, so she'll rubber stamp all the money flow to Dr. Fauci. So literally, we're one step away from seeing the whole circle that you and I discussed yesterday and the day before, in which China and Dr. Fauci are like this, Dr. Barrick and Dr. Daszak. The money goes then from the captured White House to Moderna and to Pfizer. Dr. Fauci gets a kickback. Moderna gets to make more money than they've ever seen in their lives. So does Pfizer. All of us get disabled. That suits the Chinese Communist Party really well. Or we die, or we're infertile, and it's just a complete circle. And the people who are behind the lab leak, the suppression of treatments, the vaccines are all the same people. And in this case, getting one $400 million check at Christmas. We don't know of how many. It could be every month. It could be every quarter. We don't know if there's a $400 million check going to them, every 6 weeks. We literally don't know. It's the first mention. I just happened to give him a $400 million check.
The most disturbing of this, the buried lead of this, is that, and you just laid out how because we're not talking about Yale qua Yale, we're talking about Yale as a massive, major institution, foundational element of our public health system. But when you just ticked off every great university in the world, essentially, right?
Yeah.
Particularly for medicine and public health, because at the beginning, one of the things that the universities were with the leaders back in the 18th and 19th century of medicine. And that's one of the foundational elements. Besides being schools of theology, it was to be schools of medicine. What was most disturbing in that is that the guy knew, because he'd been prepped, they got brilliant lawyers, they've been prepped, he knew about the studies, he knew where Rand Paul was going to go with this questioning. He would sit there and lie, bald-faced lie, and not even have any kind of reaction to it. The pharma healthcare industrial complex is now so out of control. It's far more serious. I keep telling people in this town, big tech and big pharma are far more dangerous than the arms industry, which is dangerous enough.
Yeah.
And these guys, the arrogance of these guys, they just had a senator who knows this stuff, Rand Paul, asking questions that he knew Rand Paul had the receipts. And he sits there, and that's why Rand Paul started to get frustrated. He will look you in the eye under oath and lie to you and just say, hey, it's just another day at the office. Naomi, we've got a couple of minutes. Give me your assessment of that, because now I think we've entered dangerous territory.
Well, you're not going to like my assessment of it. I mean, he definitely did that. He lied under oath. There's no question at all. He knew he was lying under oath. I guess my question to you, I mean, I'm going to put it back in your court. Why aren't the Republicans moving ahead on, beyond theater? I mean, why aren't these people getting the next?
Do you think, this is your area of expertise, do you think that they're minority in the Senate, but even in the House, are you seeing the type of action that you think you need to see in order to bring this industry to heel and actually get real meaningful information out to the American people? Ma'am.
I didn't quite hear the end of your question, but I recognize that the Republicans are a minority in the Senate. I just feel like even Rand Paul could move from outrage to just spelling out what the legal implications are of lying under.
No, but they're not minority in the House. Are they doing enough in the House where they have power? Are they using this power the way they need to? Because this is maybe one of the toughest enemies we have internally is big pharma and big tech. Are they using that power to the level of smash mouths they need to bring an arrogant guy like this to heel?
No, I would say categorically not. I mean, it's nice to see the Twitter evildoers being made uncomfortable, but now what has happened to them? To my knowledge, nothing. It's great to see Stéphane Bancel called out in a lie, but respectfully, I think Senator Paul should have gone in there he has access to it, surely, with the royalties. To whom did they go? That's his government now, right? That's his agency. Who were the scientists, the NIH? How much money did they make? Did Dr. Fauci make money? Did Dr. Birx make money? Did Dr. Collins make money? I mean, all of these things should have been asked and answered prior to this important televised hearing. And certainly the implications of the follow-up should be spelled out and messaged to the American people much more clearly than they are. If I were Stéphane Bancel, I would think, okay, well, that was uncomfortable, but this will go into the black hole. Legacy media won't cover it. I'll be fine.
Naomi, we got to bounce, but tell me the book. How do people get the book? The book's hurtling up the bestseller list. Let's see it. How do people get it? How do people follow you?
I just have to show everyone. I'm so excited for this day, and I'm so thrilled for this day, which would never have happened without the War Room Posse. Go to Amazon. We sold out our first printing in 48 hours. Yeah, thanks to you all. Thanks to you, Mr. Bannon, and to your wonderful team. So go to Amazon, Pfizer Documents Analysis Reports, put this in the face of those evildoers so that they can't lie anymore and they're held accountable.
What's your Twitter feed now that you're back up?
It's Dr. Naomi R. Wolf. It's Naomi R. Wolf on Getter. It's dailyclout.io. And and it's my Substack. So thank you so much.
Great. Day. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
War Room Battleground with Stephen K. Bannon.
Okay, welcome back. We've got a lot of stuff to get to, and we'll get to Joelle in a second. I just want to get you up to date. First off, there's total chaos in New York right now with the AG, and of course, mainstream media, MSNBC, or maybe I should say left-wing media, MSNBC and CNN are complete meltdown over because they were so sure this afternoon they were going to get an indictment on President Trump and getting perp walked on Friday or maybe on Monday. That ain't happening, and there's a lot of consternation about what's actually going on. Of course, it's a completely made-up case, right? And even judges are saying it's ridiculous. There's also a firestorm in federal court right now in New York, in Washington, D.C., about this entire Mar-a-Lago situation, trying to get, President Trump's lawyers to testify in this. This is, they've had overnight forced them to do a 1 day, get your papers ready for appeals. There's something, as we had Mike Davis on the last hour, something very, very strange going on here. And Chief Justice Roberts, that's the court that reports to him. So there's going to be a lot in play there. We were going to have Boris on, but they're obviously in and out of lawyer meetings nonstop. We'll pick up on that story tomorrow. And like I said, I hate diverting time for it, but it is the administrative state coming after President Trump. What it's doing is galvanizing the nation. I can tell you that the polling has been nothing short of just unbelievable. I think Governor DeSantis really hurt himself last week with that namby-pamby. When he came out at that press conference or whatever it was with the planted question, and saying the things he said about Stormy Daniels and the president. I think people, after waiting the whole weekend, people were just sitting there going, that's not good enough. Also, Piers Morgan, this interview with Piers Morgan, very disturbing for a guy. Remember, we don't have time for on-the-job training. And here he's walked right into the Biden narrative of Putin as a war criminal. If you want to get a solution to the Ukraine, if you want to stop the slaughter of the Ukrainian people, if you want to, somehow get this in a place that people can get to a table and start talking, you can't designate people as war criminals beforehand. It's just absurd and shows a lack of maturity and a lack of really understanding how historical and war processes work. We didn't designate the Nazis as war criminals before we defeated them. We didn't designate the Imperial General Staff as war criminals before we defeated them. We defeated them first, and then you go through the process of where the crimes against humanity took place or war crimes that took place. You let the process, let the process run its course. I just think that DeSantis is showing himself, and I think he's been a very good governor. I've always been very complimentary of being a governor. I just think he's shown himself in the last couple of weeks, and I think he's damaged himself much farther than 24. I think there were going to be real questions. Does he have the discernment? Does he have the judgment? Does he have the toughness? Does he have the experience? Right? Can he? Because the difference between being a governor and being president is the thing of scale, right? Of scale. So the other things that are going on, they're vastly important that we just don't even have enough time to get to, and that's why we carved out so much time right there. These hearings are going on Capitol Hill about the vaccine, about the mandates, about all of it. Right? We got to get to the bottom of the Wuhan lab. You got to get to the bottom of the bioweapons program that went on, about who was responsible, who's accountable, and you got to get to the bottom of this vaccine. In addition, you got the Biden family, the crime family payments. I mean, I've never seen a situation where you actually had the bank records up there on a big screen, and the mainstream media doesn't want to address it. The Biden family is on the payroll of the Chinese Communist Party. That it can't even be a question. Even James Comer and some of these types that are not fire breathers are sitting there and shocked by what they're seeing as far as the Biden family involvement with not just a hostile power, a power that's an existential threat to the country and to the citizens of the United States. The two other things is this meeting in Moscow, which is one of the meetings and one of the arrangements, and what's coming out of there is going to have an impact on your life, your children's life, and your grandchildren's life for decades and decades and decades. And not just geopolitically and militarily and for the country's security, but also for the country's finances. The number one thing coming out of there was Putin saying, I'm going to start doing all my transactions and convert them into a Chinese yuan, which is their currency. This is huge. Remember, their number one focus with their partners in Tehran, with now the Saudis, with the Iraqis, all this, they're getting rid of petrodollars and going to petro yuan. That is a game changer. I have argued this for years, and over the last year with Birch Gold, we actually started putting together the end of the dollar empire. Now, look, there's all types of obligations that come with being the prime reserve currency, of being the world's reserve currency, like the British had with the British pound. And that's not all easy, and sometimes it gets you into things that maybe you don't want to get into. But if you're going to not become the prime reserve currency, that is a long process of conscious decisions you make not to do that, not to have it foisted on you. And right now, we're not in the financial shape. If we were not the prime reserve currency, our entire economy and capital structure and finance would be totally upside down. But it's being forced on us because of decisions of people like Jay Powell, of people like Janet Yellen, of people like Joe Biden and this illegitimate regime. And so there's not even enough time to go through all that, because part of it we got to divert to this clown show that's going on in New York City, and the deeper clown show that's going on around this grand jury in Washington, D.C. that's going after President Trump for everything. You have to ask yourself, if the people have caused this chaos and caused this disorder, is their number one thing, instead of trying to solve the underlying problems they created, because this is all self-created, is to go after Donald Trump? What does that say about it? Is it Donald Trump's fault of where the economy is today? Is it Donald Trump's fault of where the Federal Reserve and interest rates are today? Is it Donald Trump's fault about the Legion of Doom that is now coming together between Persia and China and Russia, Pakistan, and others? President Trump's whole work was to keep those separate, put pressure on China to start to break the CCP and to bring our jobs home in the process. So you have to ask yourself, besides the vaccine, the other biggest story, because I think at the end of the day, this is, we're not just hurtling towards the singularity. The age of AI is clearly upon us, and I want to get to. I tell you what? I want to play the cuts. If Memphis can, let's play the cuts, and I want to bring our own Joe Allen in. This is so disturbing that I want to make sure you see it. We have played parts of this before. I want to make sure you see it, and then we'll bring Joe in to give us observations. Memphis, can you go ahead and play the cuts?
What do you think happens to humanity? And so I think there's almost like three ages to mankind, or to compute, right? Up until recently, almost all compute was human. And then now we're in kind of this mixed era. And then we're probably going to move into an era where most of the compute in terms of actual impact to the world is going to be completely driven by machines. We're kind of in this transition phase. Do you think AGI eventually subsumes us? Is biology just a bootloader for a future machine intelligence?
Certainly the future will be like, and what humans do and how we spend our time and, what is made available to us will be really quite different. But that's been the case for a kind of like life before and after every technological revolution in history. I do think this one is going to be the biggest one ever, but I suspect that's a mistake. And it's just each one gets bigger, and there will be something like far more huge on the other side that we can't like think about. Trying to think about artificial intelligence before the computer revolution would be like, before the industrial revolution, at least that would have been tough.
But do you think it's a technological leap, or do you think it's a shift in terms of introducing a new species that's competing with us? Because it seems like at some point you hit a transition.
I think if we're in any world where it's like a us versus them situation, that's quite bad. And we just shouldn't go there, which I think means some version of a merge, at least for some of us. Or as my co-founder Ilya likes to say, we build an AGI that really loves humanity. I do suspect that even if we think like the merge is good and a lot of people are going to do that really long term, there will be many people who don't want to. I think human drives will sort of be remarkably the same as they have been for tens of thousands of years. And there will be like, I don't know, maybe it's like an exclusion zone or something where if you want to like, live the like no AGI life on Earth, you do that. And if you want to merge and go off, explore the stars, you do that.
Okay, we don't have what we had boot up this morning. Maybe we get back to that again tomorrow, Joe. But this is, tell me what we just saw.
So, Steve, that's Sam Altman, OpenAI's CEO. Actually, and if Memphis just wants to be ready to roll on it, we'll have another clip for you in just a second, Bill Gates. But so what we just saw is Sam Altman talking about the future of artificial intelligence, which is something that he was very careful to discuss on ABC, which we covered last night. And it was, what he's saying there is that we are at the inflection point that the sort of singularity community talks about, that the people who are warning about artificial super intelligence are talking about. And he's also discussing what the solution is. If you have super intelligent artificial intelligence, or if you have an artificial...
Slow down. Stop. Don't bury the lead. Because I got to go back. This is so important. We have been, and this is what I've been warning people about. There's things happening in these companies. There's things happening in the weapons labs. There's things happening in the research universities. Of the whole singularity, which is quantum computing and regenerative robotics and CRISPR and nanotechnology and biotechnology, of all the different elements that converge for the true singularity, and AI being a part of that, we are so much farther ahead than it's being led on. And so I just want to hit rewind for a second and go to this, because this was the key thing. When he says inflection point, he says an inflection point already with AI. Well, hold it, dude. ChatGPT is we are within 100 days of when it was released to Davos, man. This is my point, is that it is the acceleration at an accelerating pace. What's already in, and now you've got Google's going to turn their entire business model over to surging these guys, and his other founder came off the beach to go back to work. Zuckerberg has just let go. His biggest thing was to pivot to metaverse. Forget about metaverse. Still be a metaverse. Forget about it. We're all AI. Bill Gates, the age of AI, he said all Microsoft's going to be this. These are massive companies that run the intellectual property, run it all today. And what's Altman saying is what I have been fearing for a while. Oh yeah, we're at an inflection point because what people are talking about is going to take decades to get to. We're here today. And if we're not here today, you're going to be here pretty quickly, because we're within 100 days of when this just got released to the public. Joe Allen, please tell me where I'm wrong there, brother.
Unfortunately, I don't have any good news on that front, other than human beings have always muddled through whatever the problem, and I'm sure that we will continue to do so. But when you talk about just something as simple as the large language model, which is actually, I believe, going to be a huge impact going forward, the GPT-4 that they just released, that was basically ready to roll last year. They're just now releasing it. GPT-5 is right behind it. And then, of course, as we've discussed, Google, Meta, Baidu, Gab, Elon Musk, all these people are starting to jump into that game and push it forward. But there are all these other types of artificial intelligence that you've got everything from simulation modeling, whether it be for engineering or social modeling. You've got everything from like protein modeling to the kind of battlefield surveillance and pattern recognition in communications. So the goal, what Sam Altman's talking about there, the goal is artificial general intelligence. That's that's the stated goal at OpenAI. And that will be just de facto a super intelligence, right? You have a system that is faster than a human being, its scope is broader than a human being, and its memory is basically indefinite. And so I was surprised reading Bill Gates' recent post, "The Age of AI has begun." He tacks it at the bottom, but he basically says super intelligence is on the way. And what he means by that is artificial general intelligence. And it's something that, Gates is a friend of Ray Kurzweil's, but he's always expressed a lot of skepticism towards these ideas. He's always kind of held back. Like many people in AI now, he's coming out the other end saying that he sees something like a singularity. That wasn't his words exactly, but, he referenced in his blog post, Bill Gates, right? He references two books that we've discussed on the show for 2 years now. The one being Super Intelligent, and the other one being Life 3.0.
Joe, hang on for 1 second. Obviously, this is important, and we're going to have you back on the morning show, but just hang on right there because we have breaking news coming. Man, this upsets me no end. We got to pivot to this, but we have to. Just hang right there. I got Boris Epshteyn joining us from Florida. Boris, there's an explosion on the internet now about a letter that's exculpatory, and they've canceled the grand juries. Tell us what exactly is going on.
Steve, what's going on is this. Honor to be with you. Honor to be with the posse. What's going on is this: is that the Manhattan, for what is being reported, the Manhattan DA is in total meltdown. There's complete dissension internally, and there's dissension between the DA and the grand jury. They canceled the grand jury meeting. This is all according to public reports. But here's the bottom line. The letter just went out from I believe, the president's attorneys, and the letter's been public, that was originally sent by Michael Cohen's attorney, McDermott, Will and Emery, to the Federal Election Commission, specifically and directly saying that Michael Cohen acted on his own volition with no involvement from President Trump whatsoever. It's completely exculpatory, and it's a game ender. It ends this already joke of a hoax of a case that has been targeted against President Trump. This letter is a bombshell. It's out everywhere. Daily Mail has it. It's from McDermott, Will and Emery as Michael Cohen's counsel, Michael Cohen's attorneys in 2018 to the FEC, Federal Election Commission, again saying that Michael Cohen acted fully and completely on his own volition.
Okay. But Boris, here's the thing. This letter is from 2018. The people have known this. How did the DA take the whole world down this rat hole or this sinkhole and not have this letter? I mean, this letter is very exculpatory. How could that possibly happen, sir? Okay, I think we just lost Boris with the bad connection. Let's see if we can get him rebooted on. Okay.
Steve, I'm right here. Can you hear me?
Hey, Boris. Yeah, Boris, we totally lost you. So you guys take it from the top. Hit it again.
What I'm saying is it's three letters. It's T, D, and S. Trump derangement syndrome. President Trump is the only leader right now leading the American people. President Trump is the only one standing between America and its complete downfall, and he's dominating by 40 points in all the polling. The Democrats see this. They know it. They're trying to bring him down with these hoaxes, and they're failing, epically failing with the Manhattan DA, failing New York AG hoax, Georgia, failing with the quote-unquote special counsel. President Trump and his team are dominating all across the board, and they're doing it for the American people.
But Boris, are they taking a back seat because they got exculpatory evidence? DA in New York is clearly a disaster. Are they stepping back here because the Mar-a-Lago thing is picked up, including you got appeals court meeting in the middle of the night, which nobody's ever heard of? What's going on on this Mar-a-Lago thing? Do they think they got a better chance to get their hooks in President Trump that way, and they're just telling the DA in New York, "You're so incompetent, just back off"?
Steve, I can't talk about certain of those proceedings, deliberations, but let me tell you this: absolutely not. President Trump has did everything correctly and by the book in all of these undertakings, all these fronts. And no, I think the Manhattan DA is acting, independently, and hope maybe with some direction from others, saying, "Hey, this is ludicrous." The Financial Times, the Liberal Bible is saying, "Don't do this," and you've got Joe Manchin saying, "Don't do this." You've got liberal outlets calling on that hoax to be put to an end, and I think that's causing a ton of disarray and a ton of problems. The New York Post reporting that assistant district attorneys are shaking their heads at this witch hunt, which should end now, especially after this latest exculpatory evidence. Now, two of Michael Cohen's prior lawyers, both Bob Costello, for whom he signed an attorney-client waiver, and McDermott, Will, and Emery, for which he signed a waiver, now all saying that Michael Cohen is a liar, and he lied, and he acted on his own volition.
Boris, is Judge Roberts going to step in as a supervisory Supreme Court justice on this situation with the appeals process in Washington, D.C., or is the president going to go to the Supreme Court and look for a ruling from them, since the appeals court looks like they're going to come out on the side of Jack Smith, sir?
Steve, again, I can't get into the specific deals because whoever's leaking this, it's all under seal. They're committing a huge violation by doing so. But here's what I will say. President Trump is going to continue to fight for the Constitution, continue to fight for the American people, and President Trump did everything by the book, did everything correctly, and he's got absolutely nothing to hide.
Boris, Mike Davis said the exact same thing at the start of the 5 o'clock show. How do people get to you on social media, brother?
Steve, thanks so much for having my information. The website is boriscp.com. Sign up right now at boriscp.com. Hot on Getter at BorisCP, Twitter at BorisCP, hot on True Social at Boris, and the hottest Instagram, Boris_Epshteyn. Stay strong, God bless, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Thank you. Breaking news, massive exculpatory letter coming up from another one of Michael Cohen's lawyers. We'll make sure we get it up and put it up in the chat. And so tomorrow morning, Joe, I'm going to talk to you tonight. I want you back, and we got to carve time out and go through this. This is, when this age is remembered, it ain't going to be remembered for the Manhattan DA chasing Donald Trump. Trust me. It's not going to be remembered from Jack Smith and another one of these bogus grand juries. It's going to be remembered for this artificial intelligence. I think Gates is right, and we got to start coming up with solutions now. Joe, how do people get to you? How do they follow you overnight till you're back on tomorrow?
Well, I got to say, Steve, at least there was a little good news brought in there at the end. But so joebot.xyz, warroom.org, under the transhumanism tab, article up, mental jigsaw about the effect of artificial intelligence on the brain, how it manipulates the brain to react with an anthropomorphic response. Also at JOEBOTXYZ, Getter, and Twitter.
Thank you, brother. I want to thank the team in Memphis tonight. Very complicated show, a lot of in and out. So thank the team in Memphis. Great job, Lindell TV. We'll see you back at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. You got a homework assignment, birchgold.com/Bannon. Go get all the information and my writings tonight. See you tomorrow morning at 10.